Somewhere behind your eyes, right now, a voice is reading this sentence to you. Listen to it for a moment. Not to the meaning of the words, to the sound of them inside you, in that private room no one else has ever entered. Notice the voice has a pace, a pitch. Maybe it sounds like your own voice. Maybe just now it slipped and sounded like mine. Either way, something in you is turning these words into speech, quietly, tirelessly, the way it turns almost everything into speech. The grocery list, the argument you never finished having, the sentence you're about to say to someone in another room. You did not write these words, and yet here they are, arriving in your own voice, in your own head, as if you had thought of them yourself. Strange if you actually stop and look at it. A voice that isn't yours, spoken in the one voice you've had since childhood. Now ask something simpler, something almost embarrassingly plain. Who is hearing it? Not what does it mean, not what should you think about it, just who is on the receiving end of that voice right now? As it says these words to you in the dark behind your face. Because something is. Some part of you is not speaking. Some part of you is only listening. And that part has never once introduced itself. You are still here. Nothing has happened to you. You are still breathing, still sitting or lying down or walking with your phone in your hand. Still perfectly capable of putting this aside and making dinner in 10 minutes. Nothing is coming apart. This is only a question, small and ordinary, the kind you could have asked at any point in your life and somehow never did. The voice will keep going after this sentence ends. It always does. It will move to the next thought and the one after that, what you need to buy, what you wish you'd said, whether you left the stove on, whether the person you just texted is annoyed with you. It rarely stops for long. It has been talking in one form or another for as long as you can remember being anyone at all. But notice something about the way it talks. It talks to someone. It explains things to someone, argues with someone, reassures someone, apologizes to someone. All day, in the very room where you supposedly live alone, there is a running conversation. And if there's a conversation, there are two parties to it, one who speaks and one who is spoken to. You have always assumed you were the speaker, that the voice was you, doing the thinking, doing the noticing, doing the living. But you are hearing it right now, which means whatever else you are also the one on the other end of the line. Who is that? Stay with that question a little longer than feels natural. Don't answer it yet. Just let it sit there, the way a phone sits ringing in an empty hallway before anyone decides to pick it up. Think about an ordinary morning, not a special one, just any morning, the kind you've had 1,000 times without noticing you were having it. You wake, and before your feet touch the floor, the voice is already working. It tells you what time it is, even before you check. It tells you you're tired. It starts assembling the day, the meeting at 10, the email you forgot, the thing you need to say to someone before you say the wrong thing instead. In the shower, it rehearses a conversation that hasn't happened yet, maybe never will, playing both sides, sharpening a comeback for an insult no one has offered you. At a red light, it replays something you said 6 years ago and still hasn't forgiven you for. At your desk, it narrates your own hands typing. Good, send it. Why did you write that? Fix it later. All day, without asking your permission, it comments, it drafts. It rehearses arguments with people who are nowhere near you and reassures you about outcomes that haven't happened and probably won't. At lunch, while someone across the table is speaking, part of you is already composing your reply before they've finished their sentence, and part of you is quietly judging the reply before you've said it. You have called this voice me for as long as you've had a name to call anything. It feels less like something you have and more like something you simply are, the very sound of your own mind thinking. But look again at what actually happens when the voice talks. You can disagree with it. You've done this. Some part of you saying you're overreacting, while another part insists, no, you're not. This really is a big deal. You can be embarrassed by it, catching some thought as small and unworthy and pushing it away almost as fast as it arrived. You can be exhausted by it, wishing at 11 at night that it would please just once stop. Ask yourself plainly, can you be annoyed by something you are? Can you watch, judge, and grow tired of a voice and still be nothing more than the voice itself? Something in you clearly can hear the voice well enough to argue with it, doubt it, roll its eyes at it. That something is not making the noise. It's on the receiving end of the noise. You have spent your whole life assuming the loudest thing in the room was you, when the entire time there has also been someone standing quietly at the edge of the room, listening to all of it, never once raising its own voice to argue back. You are still here. Nothing has been taken from you. This is only a seam in something you assumed was seamless, noticed for the first time in a lifetime of not looking. Here is the strangest part, and it is worth sitting with because it does not resolve quickly. You have never once caught yourself beginning a sentence. Try it, right now, in your head. Try to catch a thought at the exact instant it starts, not the thought a half-second after it arrives, fully formed, wearing words already. The actual seam where nothing becomes something. Try to watch the gap close. You can't find it. No one can. By the time you notice a thought, it has already happened. It arrives the way a radio arrives when you turn the dial mid-song, already in motion, already speaking in full sentences, as if a broadcast had been running somewhere the entire time, and you've only just walked into range of it. You do not compose your thoughts the way you compose a text message, choosing each word before it appears. They show up finished, whole, delivered. This should feel strange, and it is worth admitting honestly that it does, rather than smoothing it over too quickly. You have spent your entire life inside a voice you never once caught being born. It is always already started by the time you notice it, like a letter that arrives sealed, addressed in your own handwriting, though you have no memory of writing it, sealing it, or sending it to yourself. If you had actually authored every thought you've ever had, you would surely remember writing at least one of them from the very first word. But you don't. Not a single one. Every thought you have ever had has arrived to you already mid-sentence. This doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. You are not broken, and nothing here is a diagnosis. It only means the voice you've spent a lifetime calling me thinking behaves less like something you do and more like something that happens to you. The way weather happens, the way a stranger's voice through a wall happens, close enough to make out most of the words, too far to ever see the speaker. And underneath that arriving voice, patient the entire time, is the one who has been hearing it, not producing it, receiving it. That listening has never once announced itself, never once interrupted, never once said a single word of its own in your presence. And yet it has been there for every sentence you've ever had, including this one. You have lived beside this fact your whole life without turning to look at it directly. It has never been hidden. It has simply never been the thing you were looking at, because you were always looking through it, out at the voice, at the world the voice described, at the next thought and the next. Now here is where it gets strange in a different way, and worth turning over slowly rather than rushing past. Picture the sound of your own mind arguing with itself. You know this sound. You shouldn't have said that. I know, I panicked. You always do this. I'm trying, try harder. It happens after almost every mistake, almost every regret, almost every 2 a.m. review of the day. A voice accusing and a voice defending back and forth, as though two people were in the room. But there is only one person in the room. So who is answering? Sit with that honestly. If the voice is the one talking, doing the accusing, running the commentary, who is the one saying, I know? Who is the one pleading, apologizing, promising to do better? Here is a possibility, and it costs nothing to consider it seriously. Maybe there were never two voices at all. Maybe there has only ever been one voice and one who hears it, and the hearer, over years and years of being talked at, learned to answer back in the only language available, borrowing the voice's own words because it had no others, until the answering itself began to sound like a second speaker in the room. If that's true, then the argument in your head you've had 10,000 times was never really two parts of you in conflict. It was one voice talking and something else, quieter, older, wordless by nature, learning out of sheer proximity to imitate speech in order to respond to a speech it never asked to be spoken to in the first place. Which means the listener has spent a lifetime being mistaken for one half of a conversation it was never actually a party to starting. That is a strange thing to consider about yourself. Not frightening, just strange. The way it's strange to learn a nightly noise in the walls was pipes settling and not footsteps, after years of assuming footsteps. Nothing was ever wrong. You were only mishearing the shape of something ordinary. You are still here. The argument in your head will probably still happen tonight, tomorrow, next week. Nothing about noticing this stops it. But something about noticing it changes where you're standing while it happens, whether you're only inside the argument or whether some part of you is also, quietly, the room the argument is taking place in. Widen this out for a moment, because it does not end at the edge of your own skull. Picture a train car at rush hour. Rows of people, most of them silent, some of them with lips moving faintly, almost imperceptibly, rehearsing a call they haven't made yet, replaying a conversation from the morning, arguing silently with someone who isn't there. If you watched closely enough, you would see it on more faces than you'd expect. The smallest movement of a jaw, a private broadcast running behind an otherwise still face. Every one of those people is carrying a voice exactly like yours, narrating, rehearsing, cataloging regrets, drafting replies, replaying old wounds in new words. Every house you pass at night, every lit window, holds someone doing the same thing you do, running a private station only they can hear, convinced, the way you were convinced, that the voice is simply who they are. Now ask the same question of all of them that you just asked of yourself. If none of those voices belong to anyone in particular, if they all arrive the same unauthored way, already mid-sentence in every skull on that train, then what is it that hears all of them? Not what hears your voice specifically. What is doing the hearing, full stop, in every one of those heads at once? It's tempting to imagine your listening as something private, something that belongs to you the way your name belongs to you, your fingerprints, your particular history. But the voice is the part that sounds like you, the accent, the vocabulary, the old grudges, the specific fears. The listening behind it has none of that. It doesn't have an accent. It has never once used a word. Every voice you've ever heard, including your own, has been loud, particular, full of opinions. The listening underneath all of them has never said a single thing. If that listening has no content of its own, no accent, no vocabulary, no opinions, what exactly would make yours different from the one on the train sitting 2 feet away, running its own private broadcast, equally convinced it is the only station in the city. This isn't a small thought. Let it sit a while before you rush past it. It is worth being honest that it doesn't resolve into something simple right away. It only widens the room a little. It suggests that underneath every separate, chattering voice, something plain and undecorated is doing exactly the same quiet job in every one of them. Not stitched together, not merged into a single thing you could point to, but the same in kind, the same in nature, wherever it appears. You are still you. Your voice is still yours, your history, your worries, your particular way of arguing with yourself in the shower. Nothing here erases that. It only asks whether the part of you that hears all of that was ever really as small, as private, or as singular as you assumed. There is a tempting shortcut here, and it deserves to be named honestly because it's the first place most people go once they notice any of this. The shortcut goes, if the voice isn't really me, then the goal must be to get rid of it, quiet it permanently, win the argument once and for all. Become someone who no longer talks to themselves, some finished, still, silent version of a person, a mind swept clean, a life free of the commentary that has followed you since childhood. It's an appealing picture. It is also, gently, not quite the point, and chasing it tends to make things noisier, not quieter. Because now, on top of the ordinary voice, there is a second voice keeping score of how well the first one has been silenced. Did I have a thought just now? Was that a good sign or a bad one? Am I doing this right? That's still the voice. It has simply put on a new costume and started narrating your progress toward silence, which is, if you look closely, exactly as loud as narrating your grocery list. The voice is not an enemy to be defeated. It is closer to weather. Sometimes it is a clear, useful morning, plans made, problems solved, an old friend's number remembered right when you need it. Sometimes it is a long, gray week of the same worry circling the same drain. You do not build a life around eliminating weather. You learn instead where you are standing while it passes over you. The real thing being pointed at here was never a quieter mind. It is not an achievement, not a state you arrive at after enough discipline, not a permanent hush you earn and then keep forever like a trophy on a shelf. It is simply this: noticing, even while the loudest, most useless broadcast is playing at full volume, that you were never only the broadcast. You don't have to turn the radio off to know you are not the radio. You only have to notice, once, clearly, that something in you has been listening to it the whole time without needing it to stop. That noticing doesn't silence the 3 a.m. voice. It doesn't stop the shower arguments or the replayed regrets. What it does, quietly, is loosen the grip of the assumption that you are made entirely of that noise. That if the voice is anxious, you are anxious all the way down, with no room left over, no floor beneath the flood. Think about the voice that shows up late at night, when the house is quiet and there's nothing left to distract it. You know this one. It goes through the day like a ledger, the thing you said that came out wrong, the message you sent that hasn't been answered, the mistake from years ago that it still, for some reason, wants to revisit tonight of all nights. It forecasts disasters that haven't happened. It cross-examines you for things no court would ever bring charges over. Most of us have only ever known one way to be with that voice, to become it entirely, to lie there and be nothing but the ledger, turning its pages over and over, agreeing with every harsh entry, adding new ones until morning arrives and the exhaustion finally outlasts the voice rather than the other way around. But there is another way of being present for that same night, and it doesn't require the voice to say anything different. It only requires remembering, the way you might remember a phone number you haven't used in years, that something in you is hearing the ledger without being the ledger. Something that has heard every entry in it for years, calmly, without once needing to argue back, without once being harmed by any of it. Something that was there the night before the worst thing on that list happened and is still here now, unchanged, listening to the retelling of it. That doesn't erase the 3 a.m. voice. It doesn't owe you a good night's sleep, but it changes slightly what it feels like to be in the room with it. Less like drowning in the water, more like noticing, even as the current pulls at you, that there is also a bank the river has been running past the entire time. You can be in the water and still know, somewhere quieter than the current, that you are not only the water. You are still here. The list will probably run again tomorrow night. This isn't about defeating it. It's about no longer mistaking the ledger for the one who reads it. You don't have to go looking for this anywhere else. It is available in the pause after this sentence, the one you are in right now, having just finished reading it. Notice for a moment the gap between one thought ending and the next one beginning. It's brief, often less than a second, but it is there, the way a breath has a bottom before the next one starts. In that gap, is there a voice? Is anything narrating, judging, planning, remembering? Probably not for that one instant. And yet you are still here in it, still aware, still in some sense present, even with nothing being said, even with no commentary running, even with the announcer for once between broadcasts. That gap is not empty in the way a dark room is empty. Something is there in it. Call it whatever you like, or don't call it anything at all. It doesn't need a name to be noticed. It's simply the fact that you don't disappear along with the last thought, and you haven't yet been replaced by the next one. For that half second, there is only the quiet fact of being here, unnarrated. This isn't a trick you need to master, a state you need to hold on to, a silence you now have to defend against the next thought that's already arriving to fill it. You don't have to keep the gap open. You only have to notice once that it was there, that hearing does not require a voice running underneath it to keep it company, that you were, however briefly, simply present without a single word being said about it. Right now, reading this, there is a version of that gap happening again, the small pause between this sentence ending and whatever thought comes next in you. Let it be exactly as short as it wants to be. It doesn't need extending. It has already done its work simply by being noticed once. None of this asks you to win an argument with your own mind or to evict a voice that has been with you since before you had a name for it. It only asks whether you were ever really the voice to begin with, or whether you have been, this entire time, the one listening to it, patiently, without complaint, without a single word of your own, since long before you could speak at all. Think of an infant, hours old, held against someone's chest, hearing sound for the first time without yet having language to turn any of it into a sentence. There was a listening there already, fully present, long before the first inner voice ever formed a single word. Whatever heard the world back then is not gone. It has simply spent a lifetime standing quietly behind an ever louder broadcast, mistaken again and again for the broadcast itself. Coming back to it now isn't a strange new achievement. It's closer to remembering a room in a house you grew up in, one you haven't stood in for years, not because it was ever locked, but because you simply stopped walking down that hallway. Nothing had to be built, nothing had to be earned. It was there the entire time, keeping the same patient, unbothered watch it always has. The voice will keep talking. It has plans for tomorrow already, probably, forming somewhere behind this very sentence. Let it. You don't need it to stop in order to know, quietly, that you are not only the sound it makes. You are also, and maybe first, the one who has been listening to every word of it, including right now, these. The voice you've been hearing this whole time, the one narrating your day, replaying your regrets, rehearsing your arguments, and yes, even the one reading these very words to you in your own private cadence, was never the whole of you. It was only ever the loudest part. Something quieter has been there underneath it for as long as you've existed, asking nothing, adding nothing, simply hearing. You don't have to silence the voice to know this. You only have to notice once who's been listening to it the entire time. If something in you loosened even slightly while hearing this, put it into your own words before it fades. Write one sentence in the comments, your own sentence in your own voice, saying what you noticed about the difference between the voice in your head and the one who has been listening to it. Not a quote of anything said here, just the plain truth of it in your words, so you know you actually arrived at it yourself. And if something quiet opened in you just now, there's another video waiting on your screen. Let it keep opening